Ever feel like you're always on the go with no time to stop? You're not alone. But what if I told you there's a rhythm of rest that could completely change how you live, work, and feel? In today's video, we're diving deep into the power of a weekly Sabbath and why it's not just a good idea, it's a gift from God. And in this video, we'll explore how the Sabbath is a sign of God's completed work, why Jesus fulfilled the Sabbath rest for us, and the Sabbath as a day of restoration and healing. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, burnt out, or disconnected, this is the video for you. Welcome everyone. I want to start by talking about something that we don't often think about, our rhythm in life. We're all busy, right? It feels like there's always something to do, something that demands our attention. But here's a question. What if we've been missing something crucial to our well-being? What if there's a rhythm, a divine rhythm, that could bring peace and rest into our chaotic, always-on world? Today I'm diving into why we need a rhythm of rest, especially a weekly rhythm that includes a Sabbath day. And this isn't just a good practice, it's a command and a gift from God, deeply tied to the life and ministry of Jesus. We'll look at 3 key reasons why this rhythm is essential for our lives. Reason 1, the Sabbath is a sign of God's complete work. In the beginning, God worked for 6 days, creating the world in all of its beauty and order. And then on the 7th day, he rested. Now, why did God rest? Was he tired? God rested to show us that his work was completed. He finished creating, and it was good. The 7th day wasn't about physical rest. It was about ceasing from work and enjoying the goodness of what had been done. This divine rhythm of rest is a pattern for us. The Bible tells us that the Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath. The Sabbath is a gift, a rhythm that reminds us that God's work is complete. And so we can stop. We can rest. But this isn't just physical, it's spiritual. When we rest, we acknowledge that we are not the ones holding everything together. God is. And we're invited to step into the rhythm of his finished work. The second reason is that Jesus came to fulfill the Sabbath rest now. In Luke 4:14-21, we see Jesus beginning his ministry in the synagogue, and he reads from the book of Isaiah, proclaiming that he has come to set the captives free, heal the brokenhearted, and bring about the favorable year of the Lord. This passage points directly to the concept of Jubilee. That's a year of rest, forgiveness, liberation. In this moment, Jesus was telling the people the time for ultimate rest has arrived, and he's the one bringing it. Jesus didn't just come to give physical healing, he came to give spiritual liberation. Through his death and resurrection, Jesus is offering us a new kind of rest, a rest that's rooted in forgiveness, freedom from sin, and peace with God. The Sabbath is no longer just a day on the calendar. Jesus is the fulfillment of the ultimate Sabbath rest, inviting us to live in the already but not yet of God's kingdom. The Sabbath points to the future rest that God has promised. But in Jesus, the future rest has already begun to break into our present. We can experience a taste of that rest today, right now, in the midst of our busy lives. And number 3, the Sabbath is for restoration and healing. Jesus' ministry was full of healing, and many of his healings took place on the Sabbath. Take, for example, the story in Luke 13, where Jesus heals a woman who had been bent over for 18 years. He does this on the Sabbath, and the religious leaders criticize him for working on the Sabbath. But Jesus responds by saying, "Doesn't each of you on the Sabbath untie your ox or donkey and lead it to water? So how much more valuable is this woman?" Jesus is showing us that the Sabbath is about restoration. It's about freedom, freedom from physical and emotional and spiritual bondage. When we observe the Sabbath, we are reminded that God's rest is not just about stopping work. It's about being restored, being made whole, and being healed from the burdens that weigh us down. The Sabbath in Jesus' hands becomes a day of liberation, a day to experience the freedom that only He can give. In John 5, we see Jesus healing a man who had been sick for 38 years. When He heals him, Jesus isn't just performing a miracle. He's showing us the heart of the Sabbath, a heart that desires restoration, renewal, and the bringing of wholeness to our lives. The Sabbath is a day for us to receive that restoration, to step into the peace and joy that God has for us. So why do we need a weekly rhythm of rest, including a Sabbath day? First, because the Sabbath is a sign of God's completed work. We rest because God's finished His work, and we trust He's in control. Second, because Jesus came to fulfill the Sabbath rest. Through Him, we can experience the already but not yet of God's kingdom and the rest that comes from being in relationship with Him. And lastly, because the Sabbath is a day of restoration and healing. It's a day to be reminded of the freedom and peace that God offers to all who come to Him. So if you're feeling tired, overwhelmed, disconnected, remember that God has given you a gift in the Sabbath, a rhythm of rest that restores and renews and brings peace. We don't have to keep striving and working without ceasing. We can stop. We can rest. And in doing so, we align ourselves with the rhythm of God's perfect creation and His perfect peace. So let's embrace the Sabbath, not just as a day, but as a rhythm that we can incorporate into our lives, finding rest in the finished work of Christ and experiencing the healing and the restoration that only He can provide. If you want to know more about rhythms and Sabbath rest, then why don't you watch this next video about the rhythm God established in creation.